All right, hey everybody, we're going to talk about progressives today. And the first question says, were the progressives successful in making government more responsive to the will of the people? Do they listen and change the problems in society? And what would the progressive movement been like without the muckrakers? Okay, so we're going to talk about progressive movement. That means progress. We're bringing progress to this Gilded Age corruption society. Okay, so we're going to start here with sort of the definition. So progressive era would be we have plenty of social problems that are resulting from rapid industrialization, rapid immigration, urban growth, and corruption in government. And yesterday, when you did your stations, or whatever day you did the stations, you saw all these things, right? All these problems coming about. So these people are going to rise up and they're going to say, hey, we'll try to fix the problem. We'll work for this working class people and try to get them, more rights and better conditions. And so they're called progressives. They want progress in society. They are from both political parties. So it's not just Democrats, but it's Democrats and Republicans. They live in the cities themselves. That's very important because they're going to see these problems firsthand. They are educated, and education is like the thing, okay? If you have an education, then you have so much power because now you're able to influence other people. You know how to speak and speak well. You know how to write and write well. So they're able to use their education and their middle class standing to influence government. They felt the government should take a more active role in solving society's problems. And remember, one of the stations that we talked about was, should the government step up and help with water problems, such as like Flint, Michigan? Does the government have a role? Progressives would say yes. So they want progress in society after this corruption from the Gilded Age. So we're going to start with muckrakers, which I've sort of already introduced before, but here they are officially. And you need to know this list of muckrakers, which again, you've had all but one. So they are journalists who are obsessed with exposing scandal and corruption. So they're going to write or draw about corruption and scandal. The first one is Ida Tarbell. Tarbell. So she goes after Standard Oil Company. And that means she goes after, and I would put this to the left over here, or you might want to write that as a question. She's going to go after John Rockefeller, who owns Standard Oil. And she is going to petition the United States Supreme Court to break up his company because he has a monopoly, and the Supreme Court complies. They agree he does have a monopoly, and they basically tear apart his company. So you can imagine how happy he was. All right, Ida Tarbell, tar and oil. That's how I think of it. They go together. Not really. But anyway, and not really here, but that'll help you remember. Lincoln Steffens, we've already talked about how he went after the Tweed Ring. Remember, he wrote articles. He also will release his writings in a book called The Shame of Cities, talking about all these bosses and their corruption. Jacob Riis, remember Jacob Riis, we talked about him. He's going to report on disease and poverty in the tenements, the dumbbell tenements, in his book called How the Other Half Lives, talking about the poor half, how they live stuck in these tenements where there's disease and filth and cholera and death. And then Upton Sinclair, who you read, remember we read about the jungle, which was the meat packing industry and sausage and all the things they were putting in there, that there were no sanitation standards. So Upton Sinclair is a muckraker that exposes that. He also goes after Gustavus Swift, who has the refrigeration, can't say it, company. Railroad cars, refrigerated railroad cars. He will go after him. Okay, so Upton Sinclair is a muckraker. Let me show you their pictures. Okay, so here's Ida Tarbell, who goes after Standard Oil Company. Here is Lincoln Steffens with a crazy mustache. It says Muckraker wrote The Shame of Cities, goes after Graft, Boss Tweed. Okay, here is, oh nope, I ran out. So that's those. You've seen pictures of this, and we read The Jungle, so you should be okay with that. All right, now we're going to move to Robert La Follette, which I will do in a second over there. He is a Republican governor of Wisconsin, and he encourages something new. He calls it a direct primary, which you did, in fact, learn in civics, where all party members vote for a candidate. Everybody in the party, any, like me, like a private citizen, all the party members would vote. It says previously, guess who decided? The party bosses, like Boss Tweed. So now we're putting the power in the hands of the people. That's what progressives do. They give the power back to the people. So Robert La Follette is going to do this. He's going to use initiative, referendum, and recall. Now, you need to do something. Out to the left here, this might be a question. What is initiative? It is I, Amy King, I can propose a law. You can propose a law. Think of that I can propose. The citizen. Before, it was party boss ran everything. Referendum. It is if the state is thinking about passing something, they ask us, the voters, yes or no. They ask for our opinion. So we refer our opinion to them. We tell them yes or we tell them no. So again, they have to listen to us. Again, empowering the people. And finally, recall, which means you can remove a governor. This is not impeachment. You just don't like him. It's not that he did something unconstitutional. It's just you don't like him anymore. They did this in California in the 90s, or well, early 2000, and removed their governor with recall and put in his place Arnold Schwarzenegger as governor. So recall is removing a governor from office. They also get the 17th Amendment passed, and I remember as 17 senators, 17 senators, that's how you remember it. Direct election of senators by the people instead of by the state. So now we're able to elect our own senators ourselves, okay, by the people. All right, so there's a picture of Miss Albright and I hanging up in my room. We're standing with Senator Richard Burr. And that was a function where they invited teachers to come meet senators. Okay, but the point is, we were the like nobodies, the people, and we could elect senators. Okay, so some pictures with that. Here's initiative, referendum, recall. You notice it says, reckon you won't find much left to do in there, my friend. This is the legislator, the dude in Congress, going in to do what they do, which is vote. And this is showing that the ballot has gone to the people. Okay, we have all the power. Okay, we are the ones in control of deciding the laws, more so than in the past when the legislatures through party bosses did it all. Okay, now we're going to move to women's suffrage. And the first organization is called National American Women's Suffrage Association, which is NAWSA, NALSA, National American Women's Suffrage Association. And it says these suffragists, they're called that because they suffered. They were not allowed to vote. They suffered to get it, the right to vote, which I will prove later, the suffering. Marched on Washington March 3rd, 1913 for the right to vote, okay? And some pictures with that. Demonstrations of women with their kids marching for the right to vote. Cannot vote yet. Next is Carrie Chapman Catt. Oh, there's her picture. And you see her name, Carrie Chapman Catt. Votes for Women, full suffrage for women, giving women the right to vote. And she's on the next page, so I'm going to move this down. There she is. So she becomes NALSA's leader, and she mobilizes her group to get Wilson reelected as president because she actually thought he would push for women's rights to vote. Okay, then we have Alice Paul. So I'm going to put on my suffragette hat. It's quite ugly, but anyway. So we have Alice Paul here, and Alice, I can't get it on. Okay. Alice Paul is going to break with NALSA. and she wears her little suffragette hat, and she breaks her nails, and she found something called the Congressional Union with Lucy Stone, her BFF. And their sole goal is to get an amendment passed to give women the right to vote. She actually pickets the White House. That means protests outside the White House. She is arrested, imprisoned. She goes on a hunger strike, and they force feed her, which I will show you in class. Crazy stuff! To persuade Congress to give women the right to vote. Finally, August 26, 1920, book it, okay? You got to know this date. The 19th Amendment is official. Women can vote. Okay, so let me show you a couple other things. Here's suffrage map. I want to show you all these states right here. This is where we live. No voting for women prior to this. The first state to allow women to vote was Wyoming. North Carolina, not until this amendment is passed. The whole country then, all the women in the country can vote. Here's Alice Paul. She's so cool. Well, she doesn't look that cool in the picture, but she actually is. Okay, trust me. And here she is. They've got this sign, imprisoned. We demand American government release Alice Paul. So she's in prison at that point. I want to show you this last one, probably the most famous. This is her group, the Congressional Union. And they're standing out here in the cold snow in front of the White House. And they're holding up a sign, Mr. President, how long must women wait for liberty? I mean, they're throwing it in Wilson's face. And remember, it hadn't happened yet, but we're about to fight World War I, where we're helping people in Europe find their freedom. And these women are saying, and you won't even give us the right to vote? What the heck? Okay, so that's their point. She's arrested, but they do finally get the amendment. Okay, so child labor. Muckrakers are reporting that children are in coal mines at 9 years old. They're working 10 hours a day. Some of them are crippled, losing limbs. It's awful. Minimum age for employment, maximum hours children can work. So they pass laws restricting child labor. Here's some pictures of that very slowly. My gosh, a little girl standing in there. Look, they would make the kids work because they could reach behind the machines and fix the machines. And many of them lost limbs, many arms, legs. It was awful. Okay. Also during this time, you have temperance. And that is that alcohol was the root of all problems in society. So the temperance movement is to stop or slow down the use of alcohol. This is led by a different Carrie, don't confuse them, Carrie Nation. And she, across the nation, wants women to get their husbands to slow down on their drinking. Why? Because he would go off to the factory and work in his, 14-hour day. When he'd get off work, he'd go to the bar, drink too much, meet some woman, and creepy crawlies. Next thing you know, I'm not kidding, he'd bring the creepy crawlies home to his wife, and she know where the creepy crawlies come from. Okay, it wasn't her. So here's the thing, she doesn't blame him, she doesn't blame the prostitute, she blames the booze. So this is, let's slow down our men from drinking. It ends up with prohibition, which is totally no alcohol can be bought or sold. The 18th Amendment. 18, think you can't legally drink at 18. All right, let's wrap it up with Roosevelt's square deal. He says every working man should get a, look at this, square, it's a square deal. Okay, and that means we're going to bring about the Sherman Antitrust Act. They go after J.P. Morgan's Northern Security Railroad, bust it up. Northern Securities versus U.S., Roosevelt becomes known as a trust buster. The anthracite coal strike, Roosevelt takes steps with arbitration to prevent the strike and give workers their rights. Okay. And also, we have more Roosevelt stuff. Meat Inspection Act. It brings about the USDA inspecting meat. That's from Upton Sinclair. Okay, remember Swift's refrigerated railroad car. Pure Food and Drug Act means that not drug like drugs, but drugs like medicines have to have labels. Roosevelt's also a great outdoorsman. He wants to preserve the outdoors, and he appoints Gifford Pinchot as the head of the U.S. Forest Service. Okay, so you're going to have to go back and answer the essential questions. Make sure I check that and your summary and your questions on the side. Bye bye.